Let me begin, if I may. Obviously, Professor Fallica needs no introduction whatsoever, as he has been introduced already during the morning session. He's also obviously one of the main promoter of this Euro-Asian Forum, and has always been. Indeed, he is president of Bank Intesa Russia, and he's also the president of the Mid-Eurasia Association. And he's sitting at my left. At my right, there's the Minister Alexei Meshkov, Vice Foreign Minister of the Russian Federation, who's also been an ambassador to Italy for many years. Indeed, he speaks beautiful Italian, but we shall speak Italian and Russian as well. Thank you, then. I'd like to thank the organizers. I'd like to thank all the previous speakers. Most distinguished speakers have taken the floor, and certainly it would be nearly impossible to draw the conclusions after all what has been said so far. Let me just stress that after President Prodi took the floor and many other, again, we've been hearing a number of most distinguished guests, but another important contribution has been voiced away from this hall. The Dalai Lama had talked about Eurasia. The Dalai Lama said that he thinks that Europe is going to be more useful only when it can join efforts with Russia. This is what the Dalai Lama just said this morning, so I think that it was very interesting again to refer this to you. If I may, I'd like to ask a bit of a political question. Minister, Eurasia obviously paved the way to cultural, financial, economic, and energy cooperation. We've been hearing about all these different aspects as they have been covered by previous speakers. Now, in October 2016, there's a feeling when it comes to the relationship between Europe and Russia that this wish is not so easy to accomplish. I'd like to quote President Prodi when this morning he said that he can perceive verbal tensions that reminds him of the Cold War. In a previous panel, Lazarsky said that should Hillary Clinton win, we might be at the eve of a war. And the Russian ambassador to the United Nations said recently that such strong tensions between US and Russia hadn't been experienced ever since the war in the Middle East in '73. This is why I'd like to invite you to pass your judgment on the state of the art when it comes to the relationship between the two major blocs making up Eurasia. On the one hand, we see that if compared to such aspirations and wishes, there is another reality. Do you think that we are closer to the fact of Eurasia joining efforts with Europe, or do you think that we are actually getting further and further away from that possibility? Thank you very much. Let me thank Professor Fallica first of all. For organizing such a wonderful forum that is always a very interesting meeting. I'm here for the fifth time since it became the Eurasian Forum, and I believe that this year's edition is certainly different from all the other previous editions. And why is that? Well, I believe that this is due to the political situation, most importantly. I followed very closely all the presentations, and I believe that all panels, one way or the other, focused on political issues, focused on the interaction or missed interaction between Russia and the European Union. And I believe this bears witness to the fact that the situation is very complex, that we ourselves find that we find ourselves in a very difficult predicament. Sanctions work very much as an intercontinental missile against Russia. And as you probably remember, 1 year ago, those who triggered this missile said that the Russian economy would collapse, which did not happen. Yet, this rocket, this missile, i.e. sanctions, haven't reached Russia, but has affected the relationship between Russia and the European Union. I firmly believe that many delegates, many people here, myself included, did not understand what we read when we heard about the relationship being established between Russia and the European Union over the past 20 years. Because we thought that the strength ties could not be attacked, and yet they have been very seriously attacked. Indeed, now we are at a trough, i.e. the lowest point in the history of our relationship. Trade with Europe was reduced by $200 billion, and we find ourselves now back at the level we were in 2006. In 2006, there was a growing trend, the trade was increasing, and there were very good prospects for growth. What is happening now is quite the opposite. I firmly believe that all of us here would like to stop this downward trend and resume the upward trend. Well, this is something that may only happen if we cooperate. We have to relaunch cooperation, to revamp our cooperation. I'm ready to cover the subject in greater detail, but for the time being, let me just say that the Eurasian dimension exists, is real, and it is exactly the dimension that will enable us to give new thrust to the relationship between Europe and Russia. I agree 100% with the idea that was launched by President Prodi, and I believe that similar ideas have been voiced also by the Kazakh President Nazarbayev, who said that a dialogue again has to be relaunched. Maybe also initially just amongst experts. Anyway, our dialogue should be started to try and understand what is the situation in which we'd like to coexist. Thank you. Well, you've anticipated what I meant to refer to later on. Indeed, President Prodi this morning was referring to that. So I was wondering whether you think that we're closer to the vision of the Dalai Lama or to the scenario of disgregation, and what do you think is the role to be played by the business community? Because as the minister was just saying, and the previous presentations already referred to us, reference was always made to the political situation. What do you think is the situation we're in? Well, I think that two considerations are in order. This forum of ours is an important opportunity to establish a dialogue. As was said this morning, it is dialogue that has to be promoted and encouraged. And this forum has a strong potential in that it is already a reality. The Eurasian Economic Community is not an idea, it's a truism, it's something which exists, it's an area, it's a real. There's a customs union, there are people who export to Brest, and They may, for example, pay no customs up to the borders with China, up to Kazakhstan. So again, this Eurasian community is a truism, and many people establish dialogue with them. Israel, for example, has asked for a bilateral agreement with the Eurasian economic community, and the same is true for Vietnam. So Vietnam and Israel. So there are quite a number of countries, as many as 50 actually, that ask for that. We want to stress that this, again, is a truism, that this is reality. Indeed, the world is becoming multipolar, not bipolar. So we used to say that situations can be solved with a show of strength, and this is not the case. The US and Italy are going through an electoral period, and as President Prodi was saying, we have to accept that we live in a multipolar world. There's not just one country guaranteeing the governance internationally. It is a time for compromise, as President Prodi rightly said, and a compromise obviously has to be understood in its most noble meaning. So despite the electoral environment we are going through in Italy and especially in the US, there's a lot of disquiet there, because at times they refer to Russia even in wrong ways. The U.S. are not truly going through an economic wonderful situation, but rather than talking about that, the American candidates are talking about the terrible situation in Russia, because they just want to focus their attention on something else but the problems they have at home. At this forum, Italian government delegates were involved, and there's a strong national interest in strengthening our ties with Russia. We might be biased, but I believe that now what I'm saying is not biased, because again, this strong will to join efforts with Russia. Do you think that the vital and economic forces may, in a way, compensate the action that has been brought about by politicians in the elections in America? Sometimes, as you were saying, the Russian is referred to based on wrong assumptions. Do you think that Russian entrepreneurs, Italian entrepreneurs, can compensate for these problems caused by politicians? Well, I can tell you that direct investments in Russia between January 2015 to June 2016, I'm just referring to direct investment, well, there have been 80 important investments are being made by foreign investors, European investors and American investors in Russia. And in 2013 and 2014, there were as many as 100. This obviously refers to a quite lively atmosphere. The entrepreneurs know where their interests are better protected, and the political climate is not reassuring, yet they understand that there is a great potential in Russia. Sanctions obviously did not encourage that. Sanctions, as I was saying, affected importantly industries such as the food industry, for example, more specifically, and the IT industry, and all the advanced technology industries, but it also had a negative impact on trust. So that is the negative repercussion. But as for Italy, and I'm always reiterating this, and that the audience here represent something like 80% of the company that contributed to the trade between Italy and Russia. At times, there are contracts that had been signed and that are delayed by the sanctions, and they amount to some $36 billion. Well, these agreements are now frozen despite them not being included in the categories, in the chapters, in the list of industries that are, again, directly hit by the sanctions. Thank you for giving us a few facts. Well, this event is the most important event of what the Meteor-Eurasia Association does. Indeed, throughout the year, as journalists, we are given figures on the trade between Europe and between the EU and Russia. You referred to 75 billion euro less of trade between 2010 and 2015. Trade shifted from 278 billion to 202 billion. So there has been a dramatic drop. And this has been referred to by a loss for both sides by the Meteor-Eurasia Association. There's a question I'd like to raise to the minister now. President Fallico said that, as a matter of fact, the Eurasian Economic Community is a fact, which is true, of course. And quoting to the Dalai Lama, I was referring to the fact of the European Union being part of it, as it were, which is, of course, wishful thinking. Well, during the morning session, we heard of other players from the East, for example, Chinese players, for example. So a question that I would like to raise to the minister is the following. Why a dialogue with Europe is so important, despite the fact that Russia has other options? Indeed, Russia has made us understand that there are other options. I think about the relationship that they may establish with China, as was said today. Oftentimes, Russia feels that they are misunderstood by the European politicians. Why should Russia be so much interested in establishing closer ties politically and economically with the European Union? Why wouldn't they just look east? Because again, the option for them is open. As we often say, starting on a sad note, I would like to move to a less sad note. So there are certainly positive aspects, as Professor Fallico highlighted. If we look at the bilateral relationship with the European Union countries, well, with a number of such countries, despite the situation is not completely solved, but still, we are increasing trade with a number of such European countries, and the traditional system is being resumed. Let me quote a simple example. Less than 2 weeks ago, the Intergovernmental Committee for Industrial and Financial Cooperation resumed its operation. The previous meeting was held in 2011-2013. And this is not a unique feature, because with many countries of the European Union, we all did organize such meetings. And it is thanks to these meetings that we would like to solve all problems for our entrepreneurs and for our companies. Such events, such meetings should also pave the way to future cooperation. I believe that our European partners understand that the usual conditions at which they worked in Russia are not there, because the niches that such entrepreneurs were filling are now filled by other entrepreneurs. As a matter of fact, there are a number of interesting projects underway with the Chinese partners being involved. Some of such projects require also the greater integration. Now, with reference to the Shanghai organization, I can say that many countries are knocking at the door and wish to be admitted to this organization for the cooperation with Shanghai. But let me go back to the subject of the EU-Russia relationship. A study was carried out to analyze such relationship. And that has been carried out with the experts of Mrs. Mogherini. So much of the work has already been completed. And we came to the conclusion, which surprised us remarkably, in that we were very pleased in finding out that in different industries, in different fields, relations are still underway and are fully alive and kicky at the level of experts and not of political entities. So, for example, fight against terrorism has been one of the subject matter. I'm very sorry that the dialogue on energy came to a stop. I'm very sorry, but this has not been the result of a decision that we have made. No, as far as future contacts, I can say that during the visit by Juncker in St. Petersburg, a memorandum has been drafted, and that has been given to Brussels, but Brussels never answered back. So I cannot say that at the EU summit this memorandum gets approved. A year ago, we sent our proposals as drafted by the Eurasian Economic Community, with which we were inviting the EU to start a bilateral dialogue with the European Union on the one hand and the Eurasian Economic Community on the other side. The EU took months to answer, but we're very patient. And at the end, when we got the answer, the answer said that they were still analyzing, but the conclusion should be reached at some stage. But I understand that Brussels is not yet ready to come up with a stance, with a declaration. So on the one hand, there are good prospects to move forward, but the time available is increasingly less because new partners come to the fore, new initiatives are entered into, new countries are willing to cooperate with us and are not scared by sanctions. Anyway, Russia has always been a European country. Those who doubt about that should read some books on the history of the relationship between Russia and Italy. Then those people would understand the nature of our relationship. They would understand when such a relationship started off. Russia is both a European country and an Asian country.
La risposta è una domanda, anzi per chiudere 30 secondi, le chiedo perché poi dobbiamo finire con il Presidente Fallico. Ministro, l'idea che è stata lanciata questa mattina dal Presidente Prodi di una conferenza dove si mette...
One of a conference where we are placing cards on the table, and I guess that that's between authorities and thinkers at technical level in order to re-establish right relations between Russia and Western partners. Would you believe that this is plausible? Now, how would you like to close and end this session with an optimistic word? How can we work on that? What can we do? What can we imagine on that front? Sometimes we have to start from a different format, from a different viewpoint. Can you think of anything else? I've already said something about this. I support entirely this idea. I am a promoter of that idea. The higher the participation level to this conference, and the higher is going to be the level of positivity, or at least, maybe I should say it in a different way, the more realistic it is going to be. The results will tell us where do we stand, and the moment is the one of getting together, reading in between the lines, and I believe that when addressing one of our partners, we've heard saying, this is the third time that we hear your own interventions, your own contributions, and nothing was changed. I believe that it would be very important to have a conference where it is going to be possible with some sincerity, without any criticism, to try and find new ways to correct this situation. Russia is ready for this and open for this situation. Up to you in just 3 minutes to wrap up, to summarize, and to say something about this idea. Trying to find a new way, a new way to say something between Russia and its individual European countries, something that could prove useful in order to summarize the meaning of this first working day. I believe that the proposal submitted by Professor Romano Prodi is sort of a bet. And I am one of those who just loves dreaming. Now, maybe in a few years we will have a different format, but still Italian and Russian. And the members of the Economic Euro-Asian Committee will probably be a way to invite next time to the 6th Forum also other members from the Economic Commission and Committee of the European Union. I believe I'm referring in terms of evidence and testimony and witnesses. The Verona Forum is a free forum. That's why it stands out. It's made by of private citizens. So next year we will try and bring here not only the members of the Economic Euro-Asian Commission, but also their own counterparts from the European Committee and Commission. If only this could happen, we could extend the dialogue in a significant manner. We do definitely understand that the glue has to be represented by economic national interests, those existing between Russia, the Economic Euro-Asian Union, Italy and Europe. I'm not a geopolitician nor a politician, but we have to prove with the business and the development of cultural relations, economic cultural relations, we would like to prove that Europe is the natural ally and that Russia is the country which is strategically indispensable so as to allow Europe to have a constructive relationship for the economic development in order to fight all of the terroristic extremisms, even with respect to China and Asia in general. Our mission is the one of proving in concrete terms exactly this, that we can't do without Russia exactly now, in this very moment, when geopolitics is evolving towards a multipolar world, and whenever we have this economic stagnations, if not the structural economic crisis, which is sort of sneaking around. And we also have some challenges represented by national security, which is not the least of the things. So we take stock of all this. We have to allow for new economic contents, new economic relations, and new cultural relations as well. Many thanks to our president, many thanks to all of you. And you probably have understood that I was sort of hampering the two speakers because I couldn't speak neither Italian nor Russian, but many thanks to the minister and to the president, Mr. Fallico. Many thanks to all of you. And most of all to the Eurasia Association and the Asian Forum. We will meet again tomorrow. Many thanks for coming today and see you tomorrow.